This is part 10 of the time tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to cover adding fire, particle dust, and maybe some sparks or something floating around in the environment, and then final rendering. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's go ahead and go File, Save As, Time 8. Save Blender file, and I'm going to switch over to the 3D view. The first thing that we need to do is create a new scene, and that way I don't have to keep rendering this guy out while I'm trying to play with the fire. So we're going to hit the plus sign here, but this time instead of going new, I'm going to say full copy because I want to copy over a few things. Really, I just want to copy over the camera. So I'm going to go full scene, and here it's a new scene. I'm going to name this _ fire, and I'm going to rotate out of my camera view. So here's my camera down here. I'm going to select everything else and hit X on the keyboard to delete. So I just have my camera in the scene, and to make sure, there's my scene 1. This is my background scene. Probably should call it background. And my fire scene. Okay, so we need a start point or an object to emit fire off of. So I'm going to hit Shift A on the keyboard. We're going to go Mesh, Cube. And I'm going to drag this near the camera. Now I actually need to place it near the camera when the camera's done moving. So let's go somewhere here. You can place yours anywhere in the scene that you want fire to happen. I'm going to do, like I said, near the end of the animation. So somewhere here. If I hit period on the keyboard, it's going to frame the object that's selected, and that's the numeric keypad. Otherwise, you have to go view selected right here. Okay. I know I keep repeating a lot of things, but it's to drill it into your head. The whole idea, the only way to learn a software package is to rinse and repeat. All right, so it's near the camera. I think that's going to be good, but I need to make it smaller. So I'm going to hit S on the keyboard to scale it down. And of course, you can use the scale tool down here. And maybe something like that. It's probably a little too small, so I'm going to scale it up a little bit more. And again, that's S. I'll position it right about here. Okay, so I'm going to go inside the object. So let's go into edit mode. Tab on the keyboard is the shortcut key. And I want to duplicate this guy over a couple times. So let's go ahead and hit Shift D on the keyboard. Otherwise, you have to go Mesh, Add Duplicate. And I want to hit X on the keyboard because I just want to move it along the X axis. So let's say let's go right about there. And I'm going to do that again. So Shift D on the keyboard and hit X. And remember, we're inside object mode, by the way. Shift D, X, and maybe one more. Shift D, X. Okay, so let me go ahead and come out of edit mode, tab. So it's one solid object. I'm going to scoot it over a little bit. Something like that. Okay, so each one of these objects is going to emit fire. And I'm doing this to break up the fire. All right, so that's a good start point. Now, I thought about creating fire from scratch, but every time I was trying to do it, I was running into issues with the new 2.75 with it not rendering correctly. So we're going to use the plugin that's been added. And we're going to come down to Object with the object selected, and we're not in edit mode. We're in object mode. So we're going to come down and choose Quick Effect Smoke. It automatically generates what they call a domain box for us, and it sets up the fire sequence off the objects. So if I let me hit rewind right now and hit play, you can see here it automatically generates smoke. Okay, so we're going to modify this and change it into fire. So let's go ahead, and we know we need at least 360 frames, but we're going to set this to, let's go maybe 100. Just so we can, again, we're testing the fire effect and I don't want to keep going back and forth. Okay, that's a good start point. Let's go ahead and save this scene, or save this setup. Okay, number one, it created a box, and then it went over to the physics panel, applied the smoke sim, and turned it to a domain. All right, so a domain is necessary for any simulation. Anything that's going to be simulated needs to be inside the box. You can scale this box. In the old versions of Blender, you actually have to keep this box square. The newer versions, you don't. However, my suggestion is when you're scaling it, probably be in sub-object mode instead of the main scale option. And also after you're done scaling it, go to object, apply, and apply your scale settings, all right, just to be on the safe side. But it can be changed, and you can change the position and all that, depending on what you really need. So I'm going to bring it up a little bit. I don't need a lot of space on the bottom. Okay, the next thing that it did is it took the object, applied a smoke sim, and turned it to flow. So that's where the fire or smoke is going to come from. All right. It also took the domain and applied a material for us, set the density to 0 and volume. And it also applied 2 textures that is going to control the look of the fire and smoke. So you see here, smoke and flame. And it's set to voxel data. That's what's necessary to create the effect. And that's pretty much it. It set a few other settings for us, like the color, but we're going to be changing a lot of this. So let's first start with selecting this object here and going over to the physics panel and changing it from smoke to fire. Now, fire and smoke gives you lots of fire and lots of smoke. Fire gives you lots of fire and a little bit of smoke. You still get smoke in the fire mode. All right, so if I hit the play button now, you can see here fire comes up and then smoke. Pretty cool. It's really low res, but we're going to change that as we play with these settings. Okay, so let me take a look at my notes. I wrote down a few notes when I was playing with this. Let's see here. Set it to fire and the surface to 1.5 and the flame rate set to 1. That's fine. Volume, I can play with this. Let's just see what happens when we hit volume. I'm going to put this to 1. Not much. So I'm going to bring it back down to 0. Okay, initial velocity. Definitely want to check this. It's going to give us a little bit more chaos to the fire, and especially when I apply 1 to normal. There we go, much better. Now I'm getting more of a broken up look. Definitely what I'm after. And I think that's pretty much it. Subframes, I don't really need to worry about subframes right now. So I think that's all I need to focus on. I'm not going to worry about smoke flow advanced because I'm actually, like I said, probably going to hide the smoke. I really don't want a lot of smoke in my shot. All right, so now we've got the start point. Let's click on the domain. Is there anything else in this? There is no texture. There's no material for the actual object. Just these settings. We're good. So let's switch back to the domain. Now, the domain, the divisions right here, the resolution, that's going to give you, that's going to kind of control the look of the fire. So the higher the number, the more realistic the fire is going to look, and the more detail you're going to have to the fire. However, the higher the number, the slower your computer is going to take to calculate it. So it's going to take a longer time to build the fire calculation. My suggestion is probably around 128 for final output, and that's going to take a long time to render. And if you have a real slow computer like mine, probably stick around 64. That'll give us an okay looking fire, but it won't take forever to render. In fact, sometimes you might go too high to the point where your computer can't even calculate out the sim. And this is about calculation, less about rendering. So right now I'm going to leave it at 32 because it gives me a nice playback. In fact, let me just bring it up to 64, so double. And you can see here it's taking longer to run the simulation, but it already looks better. All right, so that's pretty cool. I'm going to bring it back to 32. Again, I'm doing this because of just time's sake, and then we'll increase it later. Density is going to deal with how dense the smoke is. So right now it's not dense at all, so it just floats up, all wispy. If it was really dense, it would float down, kind of like mist. The thing that I do want to play with, though, is veracity. This is going to give us more of chaos. So let me bring this up to, like, let's say 5. And you're going to see here it's going to get a little more chaotic, which is exactly what I want. I want chaos. Did I hit 5 or 4? Maybe 4 is the max. 4 looks like it's the max. Okay, so moving forward, what else do my notes say? Let's see, resolution, time, everything else is set fine. So we're going to go into smoke flames now. Now, this is where you can deal with the reaction. So speed is set to 0.75. Remember this number, but let me just bring it up to 1, and let's see what that does. Looks like the smoke rises a little bit faster. Let's bring it up to 10. 4 looks like the max. That just gives me a ton of smoke, it looks like. Ugh. Let me bring it down to 0.05. Oh, there we go. So the flames now go up higher and the smoke generates less. So let me go 0.5. because I don't need super high flames. All right, so that deals with the speed is going to deal with when the smoke takes effect and when the fire gives out into smoke. All right, so smoke, let's say I take this down to 0. Now I'm not getting any smoke at all, and that's kind of where I want to be. I really don't want any smoke in my shot covering anything. So maybe even take the speed up a little bit. In fact, actually, no, I'll leave it for now. Once we get the camera back in the scene and set the timeline to a longer timeline, we'll play with how tall the flames need to be. Let's see, veracity again, it's set to 0.5 right now. I want to set this to maybe 0.8. There we go. Now we're getting a little bit more chaos in this. Let's just say 2 is the max. That's not too bad. We'll leave it as is right now. Okay, so adaptive smoke domain. What this does is actually going to kind of scale the box upward based off of how tall the fire is. So if I check this, it helps calculate out less for the scene. So it's saying anything above that line that's moving up is not going to be part of the calculation. So it helps save memory. So we definitely want this activated. Let's go ahead and minimize it. Now, smoke high resolution, you definitely want to have this checked for your final output. I don't think we're going to see too much in the scene. Ooh, wow, it did really displace how long it took to render this out. Or, sorry, calculate it. That's not too bad, but anyway, we will play with this, probably set the divisions to 2. You have a noise method for this effect. Online I've heard people complain, oh, this one's better than this one. I think really for your sake, just test it. Just run a simulation, render it, and test which one you like the most. Because I think it's really a matter of opinion. All right, strength, anything else I need to adapt? Yeah, that's pretty much it. All right, smoke groups we're not going to play with because we're not adding groups. Smoke cache, we will be playing with this. In fact, actually, you can see here my simulation is set to 250 frames. So if I come down here and change this to 360, which was the length of our animation, you can see here it's going to go through. Let me uncheck high res. Rewind. All right, so you can see here it's going to play through, but at 250 frames, the animation is going to stop, or the simulation is going to stop. Boom, because we need to expand it here. So we're going to say 360. In fact, for this animation, I don't need to be running the sim while the camera can't see it. So if I switch this viewport, I'm going to hit 0 on the keyboard, over to the camera, or you can go View, Camera, and hit play. Camera can't even see it until, shoot, frame. Grab this, slide it over. Almost 200 and, I'd say starting around 274. All right. So we can say, I do want it to start before the camera gets there, but maybe at 250. So that way I'm not wasting this entire time at the beginning of the animation to run a simulation. So it's going to start at 250 and end at 360. Perfect. Might even have to move it down a little bit because it's eating up a huge amount of the scene. Let's just render it. Let's see what happens. Okay, so let me jump over to the render layers. Let me delete these and just make sure it's set appropriately. And the reason why is because this has nothing to do with scene 1. This is all about this scene. So let me go ahead and just go to the render tab and just render out a single frame. And there you have it. There is our fire. It looks like blobs of color. But it's not too terrible. It's not awful, but it's not amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and hit close. And anything else I want to play with before we continue? I'm going to hit escape. Not really. So let's actually start rendering out a better simulation. And we are going to run a cache, by the way. So once we're happy with this, let me make sure we have the domain selected. We do. Once we get the calculation to where we want, we're going to hit bake. And that's going to bake it to our hard drive to free up the RAM, because right now this is buffering into RAM. So let's go ahead and start playing with the settings. Divisions, let's bring them up to 64. And right now I'm actually going to set my start time to 250 frames. and just hit play so I don't have to waste time at the beginning of the animation. As you can see here, it already looks tremendously better. And let's turn on adaptive resolution and add 2. Hit rewind, hit play, and as you can see here, it's going to take a lot more time to calculate. So let me go ahead and let this go through, and I'll come back. The fire has finished buffering into the RAM, so let me go ahead and jump over to Rendering tab and click Render. And you can see here I have more detail in the fire, but I also have a lot more noise now going on, and that doesn't look that great. So let me go ahead and fix that. Let's close out of the render, escape, and I'm going to jump back over to the Material tab, and under Integration, this is where you're actually going to change that noise factor. So right now it's set to 0.1. The lower the number, the less the noise. So I'm going to say 0.01. Okay, and we're going to go back to the Rendering tab and click Render. And you can see here it takes a lot more time to render, but there is less noise in the shot. So this is very important to understand, that you need to find a happy balance between rendering and how much noise is being applied to the fire. So that looks pretty good, but it's just really long render times. So let me go ahead and escape this. Escape will actually stop the render. Jump back over to the Material tab. And let's set, instead of 0.01, let's go halfway, 0.05. Okay, so that's halfway between what we had it before and the original. So I'm going to say render again. And you can see here it takes less time to render, but we're starting to get noise back in the shot. So you just need to keep playing for that happy medium. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out of this, go back to the Material section, try 0.03. Shortcut key, by the way, is F12 on the keyboard, but sometimes that doesn't work on a Mac, so that's why rarely I click the F12. I don't want to confuse people. Oh, how he did that? How did he render without having to go to the Render tab? F12 is the shortcut key. So you can see here now I'm getting less noise, a little bit still, but I'm getting a better render time. So it's really, like I said, just playing with that happy medium. So I'm going to go escape. Let's come out of that. And let's go back to the Material section. And I think, to be honest, for the overall final, I'm going to use 0.01 because I liked the smoothness. But for right now, just because I'm trying to test the things, I'm going to switch this to 0.1 again. I know that's lots of noise, but it's faster render times. So you might think, well, this fire is very dense, very, very dense. Right here where density scales at, you might want to bring this down. So I'm going to bring it down to, let's say, 2. Go back to my rendering option and click Render. And you can see here that the fire is less, or it's more transparent, less opaque. That's probably too low, but it's not so extreme that we had before. So I'm going to go ahead and escape. Go back to the Material section and maybe bring it up to, let's say, 3.5. Go back to the rendering. Yeah, so now it's not so dense like number 5, and it's not so transparent like number 2. So I kind of like that more. And of course, this is all about personal preference or looking at reference images and really bouncing back and forth between your reference image and your fire to see the best results. So let's go back to the Material section. And let's see here. Is it the material that I want to play with? No, let's go back to the Texture section. I think I like the density scale. Emission. I don't think there's anything else in here I want to try to play with. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the texture. And let's maybe play with, scroll down here, emission. So you have 2 types of emission. If you open this up a little bit more, you'll see one is emission color and the other one is just emission. So let's take the emission and bring it up to, let's say, 8. And click Render. And see, that's not really doing much for us. It kind of bled out less of the darker red. So I'm going to go escape, jump back to here. In fact, we might even be able to play with this in the viewport. So if I switch, I'm going to close out of this, go back to rendering in the viewport. You can see it's going to render it out for us. And you can see we have lots of noise in the shot, but that's okay. So let's go ahead and play with some of this. Go back to the texture folder. I'm going to bring this back down to 5. And let's try emission color. Now you can see it's even more extreme on the white, and it's way too high. So I'm going to go back down to 1. Yeah, there we go. That's definitely better. And of course, I can play with density here as well. Let me scroll up and play with the overall colors here. So maybe I'm thinking this color needs to be pushed further back this way. Fire doesn't have that much white area. So I'm going to bring this down. And then I'm going to add a new little knob here. So I'm going to hit the plus sign. And this one, I'm going to go into the color, bring it up some, and make it more orange. There we go. That's better. It's giving me a little bit more detail. Of course, I can change the alpha levels of these. So maybe the red, click here, needs to be more red and less brown. Kind of like that, giving it that fiery, fiery. But the alpha channel, I'm going to bring down a little bit. Yeah, that's better. Maybe even take the orange and bring it down just a hair. Take the yellow, and I'm going to bring it down just a smidge. Smidge hair. And I think I kind of like that. The white, let me try playing with the white a little bit. Let me try maybe switching it to a little bit of blue. Just tapping just a little bit of blue in there. Kind of like that a little bit better. Okay, so like I said, you can go through, you can create some crazy looking fire. You don't have to go by the standard look. I can make this like a blue flame, like crazy, some crazy explosion happen, or green, radioactive green fire. I don't know. Anyway, it's definitely about playing with it and testing and playing and getting good results. I mean, I can, let's say I wanted to add another notch in here, hit the plus sign. And this notch I want to make, for whatever reason, let's go purple. Now you can see it's adding this purple element to the fire. So maybe this section, instead of being purple, tap in some red. Just give it another level of red hitting in there. I don't like it, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the minus sign here to delete it. Okay, so that's how you play with color. The density, again, the density can actually play with the alpha channel within, excuse me, within this element. Okay, I think I'm ready to actually do a final sim. So let me switch this back over to solid. And let's jump back over to the rendering tab. Let's actually switch the rendering to, or sorry, the material tab. Let's get this guy back to, let's say, 0.02. I'll do 0.02. Hopefully that won't be too long. In fact, let's go to the rendering and just click render. So yeah, it's not quite as slow as 1. 1 was just really slow. And it looks like it's pretty much eliminated most of the noise that was going on. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close out of that. Just seeing if there's any noise down here. Looks good. So let me go ahead and cancel that. Escape. So let's jump back over to the domain. Again, I've been on the domain the whole time. Let's just go to the physics tab though. And I think I need more detail. I really do. So, in fact, I don't know, for kicks and giggles, I'll switch over to FFT. And of course, my sim's going to go away. And I think I'm going to bring up my divisions to 96, my resolution. And this is going to take a while to render, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the rewind button. I'm not even sure I'm going to buffer this into the RAM, actually. I think I'm going to just cache this, which I would come down here and hit bake. So before I do 96, I think I'm going to need more resolution, to be honest. Let's do 128. I'm really worried about this on this machine. Very hesitant. So 128, we'll see what happens. I'm going to come down here and, oh man, that's going to take forever to render or bake. Let's try it. So let me save this first. Save just in case it crashes. And bake. So now it's going to go through and bake the animation. And you can see in that little black box right where my mouse is at, it's on frame 1. Excuse me. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the tutorial here, and we're going to pick it up after it's done running the sim. So my Fire finished baking. If I open up the tutorial folder and go into 3D, here's the bake file. Let's see how big this file is. Properties. It's 5 gigs, so this can be a large file based off your simulation. And of course, the larger it will get, the more detail levels you will have in your domain. I don't know why my domain, oh yeah, everything went gray because we baked it. So 128 seems to really bump up the file size as well. So anyway, let's go ahead and test render a shot. I actually already clicked here and clicked rendered. Let me show you. Just open up my UV image editor. And there you have it, looking pretty good. Looks actually really good. So lots more detail added, of course, as a final output. And all I did, like I said, was click render. So let's set this up for final rendering. Now, of course, in scene 1, you can actually import this scene, fire scene, as a node. So you don't actually have to render this out. However, on my machine, because it's very limited, I want to actually render out the fire the way I did the particle system and then composite it back together. So let's go ahead and prep the scene for that. Number 1, I'm going to go ahead, go back to my 3D viewport. I need to make sure that my settings are set up. So let's go output and let's choose the export folder. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new directory called fire. So a new folder, go in and I'll call it fire. For the file type, accept. Make sure no compression, make sure it's on PNG with the RGBA. And make sure that your 0 to 360 frames is set on your timeline. I'm not sure if I did that before or after I started this back up. So again, that's very important, 0 to 360 here, because again, we're using nodes to composite it. If you're using After Effects, you can actually just do like the 250 to 360 and then lay it down on the timeline in After Effects. But we don't really have that option here, so I'm going to do the whole timeline. Let's see what else. Make sure my layers are set up. I renamed my layer fire, made sure sky was not checked, and I'm just layering rendering out the first layer. Oh yeah. Let's make sure under shading that transparent is activated. We don't want the motion blur on because that might cause, it might take forever to render this if that was on. Let's see what else. I think that's pretty much it. Frames per second. Oh, no, the nodes. Because we copied this from scene 1, in fact, actually, let me just show you something. Right here, compositing. The compositing is sequencer. So that's going to render out anything in those 2 elements. I'm actually going to come in here. Let me open this up. Switch this to the node editor. Let's see, where is it? Node. There we go. And I'm going to just select everything in this shot and hit X on the keyboard to delete it. Don't need it anymore. So I'm going to grab this, drag it back over. And just to be on the safe side, post-processing, I'm going to uncheck compositing sequencer. I just want to render out what's in my 3D viewport. All right. So I think now we're ready. Of course, make sure you check your materials to see if you want to bring this down even lower to prevent the noise, or bring it up if you like the noise, however you want to set that up. And again, if you think the density is too thick, go ahead and decrease this, because it was pretty thick, but I think I'll play with that in the compositing node more than in here. I might actually just bring this down to 3. All right, so I think we're ready to go. Everything's set. Maybe even bring this down to like 2. 0.5. It's kind of risky. I'm not going to do any more test renders, so I'll stick with 3. All right, so we're ready to go. All you need to do is go back to your rendering and hit the animation button. Now it's going to go through and render out all the frames for this particular animation. So I'm going to go ahead and stop it now and let it get its thing done, and I'll pick it up here in a sec. Blender just finished rendering the fire. It took about 2.5 hours. So I'm going to switch back over to scene 1, and let's switch back over to 3D view. All right. And actually we're going to switch into node editor. Let me close these property panels and tool panel, and we're going into node editor. Okay. So we can compile the 3D view into here. Let's go ahead and add the backdrop, and you can see it adjusts. Now, the reason why we're not seeing anything, or the pocket watch, because we do need to re-render a shot. So I'm going to take the time slider over a little bit, and I'm going to click the render button. I'm going to make sure my layers are set up correctly, and let's click render. Now it's going to go through and render out the pocket watch and the face, and I'm going to go ahead and stop it and let it do that. Blender just finished rendering the frame. Let's jump over to the node editor. So click here, node editor, and of course I've got checked in background. So let's add the fire effect. I'm going to go Shift A on the keyboard and scroll down to input, and we're going to do movie clip. Open. And it was an export, fire. I'm going to hit A on the keyboard to select all of them. Open clip. And we want to combine this way over here. So we need another alpha over. Actually, I'd probably use a mix mode this time. So let me try going Shift A. Let's go color. Do I want to mix or alpha? Let's do alpha over. Okay, so this one's going to be on the bottom, or the top, and this one's going to be on the bottom. Tie this in, and there we have it. Okay, so there's a few things that I might want to play with. Yeah, it's a little too harsh. In fact, actually, let me divide my window. Switch this view to UV editor. And let's tag this into here. Okay, so I can just see everything. All right, so I'm going to pull this down a little bit more. Actually, sorry, bring it up more. Yeah, that's a little bit better. Okay, and of course, I think I need to adjust the background a little bit more. Let's see, this is the background layer. I used an RGB curves. Let me pull it down just a little bit more. And let's try an RGB curves on this one as well. I'm going to get rid of this window. I don't need it anymore. Okay, so let's maybe pull it down a little bit. Pull it up. Just add a little bit more contrast to it. All right, so I think that's good. I think we're pretty much ready. So, of course, there's a few other things that we can add. Let's first off save this. And then we're going to jump over to the 3D view. The last thing I want to create is a kind of dust fall simulation with particles. So let's go ahead and hit Shift A on the keyboard, Mesh Cube, and increase the size. Really big. Let's take the time slider all the way back to where the camera is done. Oops. Come on. All right, so I just want it near the camera. In fact, I can probably scoot it over a little bit and scale down the x-axis a little bit. Scale down the y-axis a little bit. Nope, not the y, the z. So S and Z. Probably something like that. All right, so let's switch this over to a particle sim. Click on the particle sim tab, new. I'm also going to go to the materials, new. I'm going to turn on halo, and I'm also going to, let's go back to the particle systems, under rendering, turn off emitter. Let's go ahead and set it to volume, And I'm going to bring it down to like 300 right now just for the testing purposes. I'm going to have it start at negative, let's go negative 100. And lifetime, I'm going to set to like 200 frames. And let's bring up the random. In fact, actually, let's go 300 frames. And I'm going to have it end at the actual end of the animation, but right now I'm just trying to test it. So that's good. Let's go ahead and file, save as. Not save as, should have just did file save. Okay, so now we have the particles creating. Let's play with a few things. Let's go into force weights, take the gravity down to like 0.1 because I don't want it falling fast. Maybe a little bit more. 0.3. And I'm also going to add a force setting. Let's do turbulence. Rewind. And it's going to, there we go, it's going to break up the animation a bit. Alright, so maybe increase the noise a bit. Put some scale on it. There we go. That's kind of like fall off dust particles. Okay, so I think I'm good with that. Let's go ahead and let's see here. Halo, turbulence. I think everything's set. Let me just do a rewind. I'm also going to put this particle system on layer. Do I want to just leave it here? No, I'm going to put it on layer. Let's go layer 4. So M on the keyboard. And layer 4, there we go. So now it's on layer 4. I also need these lights on layer 4. So I'm going to go M, hold down Shift, and click on layer 4. And now if I come to layer 4, there's my simulation and my objects. Or my lights, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make everything visible. I'm going to jump over to the particle sim. Let me select it. And now I'm going to bring up the number of particles probably to 6,000. Maybe not that many. Let's go, well, I think 6,000 is actually going to work. Okay. I'm actually, jump over the texture, size 0.5, that's probably good. Do I want to change the color? I think everything should be fine. So let's go ahead and save this. And what we're going to do is, we can actually, let's just jump to a later frame. So I'm going to right click on my timeline, or not. I froze it, sorry, give it a sec. Okay, so it finally unfroze. I forgot in the particle system to set the end time to 360 frames. In fact, actually, I'll just do 400 frames to be on the safe side. And maybe even stretch this out to 7,000 particles. All right, so we have 7,000 particles generating over this amount of time. Lifespan for each particle is 300, except for there's a random as well. And I think that's it. So let me go ahead and file save. Okay, so I was having all sorts of crazy issues with this. So let me just show you ultimately what I did. I dropped my particle number to 3,000. Let's see, I don't think I played with jitter. No. I, of course, baked it. I baked the animation for the particle system. Physics I didn't play with. I dropped the force field strength for the turbulence 0.2, size 0.5, and noise 4.2. All right, so that helped clean a lot of it up. As you can see here, here's my animation. So let me go ahead and leave it as is. I think I added some drag somewhere too. Yeah, right here, actually I did under physics. Added some drag, a little bit of dampening. So anyway, once you're done setting up the particles to move the way you want them to, because I'm starting to really drag this tutorial out, so I'm going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to go to the rendering tab, or sorry, the layers tab, and I'm going to add a new layer for this. We'll call this particles, or let's call it dust. Okay, dust is going to render layer 4, and it's going to render for the mask layer 1 and 3. That's the face and the pocket watch layer. And that should be it. So layer 4, dust, everything should be good. So let me jump to a later point in time, something like that. I'm going to uncheck sky. Make sure sky is not checked with any of these, so we're good to go. I'm going to go ahead and go File, Save, and go back to rendering and render out a single frame. And that way I can see that frame in the compositing window. So I'm going to stop it here and let it go through. Okay, so it finished rendering. Let's go ahead and jump into the node editor. Let's come down here, node editor, and let's add that last bit of information that we've just created. So let's go ahead and put this, I think I want to put this before the fire. So let me scoot all this over. I'm going to hit Shift A, input, and we're going to do render layered. And by the way, I mentioned earlier that you can actually select a scene instead of rendering out like the fire scene. And right here, I can actually select the scene and select the layer in that scene. So if you've got a pretty powerful computer, you can do it that way instead of rendering out the fire effect by itself. So in this case, I want to do dust, and I want to do an alpha over, Shift A, color alpha over. This one will be, that's probably fine, doing it that way. And tag this one into here. And there. Now I have the dust particles in the scene, but I'm going to change their color. So let me hit Shift A, color, and let's do RGB curves. And let's add a little bit of red. Let's pull down some of the blue and the green. Not too much. Okay, and I think they're too visible, so let me minimize some of these tabs. Let's go Shift A. I'm going to go down to Filter Blur. Let's just do 10, 10. That softens them up a bit. Maybe, well, 10, 10 is fine. And let's see what else can we add to this. I'm going to hit Shift A. Let's try it. Whoops. Shift A. Glare. Let's add some glare to them. And threshold, let's bring it all the way down. All right, something like that. Let me bring down streaks. Actually, I think, let me delete glare for now. And let's see what else we can add. Defocus. I'm not seeing anything else that I want to try to apply to this actual effect. I can try maybe a little bit of bokeh blur. It's not really doing much. I'm not seeing an update, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. Reconnect this. Yeah, I'm not really seeing anything else that I really want to add. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I think that's, yeah, it does a pretty good job of explaining what we're really after, teaching all about the nodes and the particle system and the fire and modeling. So it's a really good run through of Blender. I'm just trying to think of anything else I want to apply to this overall scene. Well, let's save this first. So that should be it. All right, so let's go ahead and set this to final render. All we need to do is make sure we're sending it to the correct folder. So the composite folder, accept, and it's going to be 3D composite, RGB, no compression, and I think we're ready to go. So we just click the animate button. First of all, I'm going to save and make sure shading, transparent, post-processing, compositing, sequencer. That's good. That's good. All right, so let's go ahead and let me say this one more time. Click the animation button. Now it's going to go through and render this whole thing out, and I'm going to come back after it's done. It finished rendering. It only took about 3 days to do so. So yeah, let's go ahead and go File, Save, and I'm going to go ahead and close this out and open up a new Blender. I know I could have just started a file new to create a new Blender file. However, I wanted to refresh my RAM. That's why I closed it out and opened up a new one. So anyway, moving forward, let's change our layout to video editing. I'm going to grab this corner here, drag it to my right, drag it to my left to get rid of it. Then I'm going to drag this corner over so I can have my properties menu. Switch this to properties. I'm going to switch this out right now. So it starts at frame 0, ends at frame 360. The frame rate is 30 frames per second, and the size is 100%. So just set those settings right off the bat. I'm going to go ahead and adjust this down here. I'm going to switch this to my timeline, drag it straight up so I can have my timeline controls right here in the center, and I'm going to switch the bottom one over to video sequencer. I'm going to hit the plus sign here to open up the properties menu. All right, so let's get our images in here. So we go add, and because it is images, I'm going to choose image. I'm going to go to export and do composite, and I'm going to hit A on the keyboard to select all the frames. You can select all the frames however you want. I'm going to go add image strip. So now it's in my file. I can actually bring this down a little bit. Or not. Why am I not allowed? No, I don't want to do that. Just be able to give me a little more space in the video section. Okay, so let me go ahead and hit play. And you can see here it's buffering the frames in the RAM. I don't have a lot of RAM, so it's not going to buffer that many, but you can see it's going through and playing the animation that we created. Now, there's things here that I don't like that I need to re-render, like the texture slipping on this and this box being created, and my background was lost because I curved it too much. But I'm going to create a tutorial 11 for that to go through and make tweaks to my final render. So let me go ahead and stop this. All right, so let's start off with the whole idea of this ending part is to show you how to get this into a final video. And we need audio for a final video. So I already created a folder called audio, and I dragged and dropped a bunch of audio clips. Now I got these audio clips from various different places. Number one is videocopilot.net. Okay. They have a motion pulse package that has amazing audio files. This is where I got a lot of my audio from, bought this. Like I said, it's great, it's amazing, check it out. There's also freesounds.org, okay? And this has a lot of free sounds that you can use. And I pull the fire effect from here. And if you want to add a little bit of music, there's a lot of free music sites out there, but this one's freestockmusic.com. And I know there's some rights that you have to go through and read when you're using these tracks, but go ahead and check them out, sign in, and see if there's anything you download if you want to add some music to your shot. Okay, so once you get audio, to bring it in, same way we brought in the video clip, is go add, or just like anything else, Shift A on the keyboard, and you can do the search this way. But anyway, add sound, and I'm going to go into my audio file, and I'm going to click this bass atmospheric 14, click add audio file. So it's going to start it right where the time slider is. I'm just going to go ahead and hit 0 on the start frame. I'm going to do that to this clip as well. So they both start at frame 0. And now I can manually slide them or just use the side panel. So I'm going to hit the rewind button and hit play. And now you can see, or hear, sorry, I have audio. Now if I want to see the waveform on the timeline, I'm going to come down to view, and I'm going to go to waveform dialog and turn it on. Now you can see I have a waveform. Okay, so that's pretty cool. Now what if I want to animate the waveform fading out towards the end? So let me zoom out a little bit. Middle mouse button will allow you to zoom. Holding the middle mouse button will allow you to pan. So let's go maybe right about 11 seconds. Actually, let's go 10 seconds. Let's do a 2-second fade out. So I'm going to scroll all the way down to, where is it? Let me click on the audio file. Looking for volume. Okay, here's volume. I can right click and say insert keyframe, or when I'm hovered over it, I can hit I on the keyboard. So you can see it turns yellow because I inserted a keyframe. Now let me drag this to the end, and I'll set this to 0 and right click insert keyframe. So now the audio file is fading out. Just so you can hear it. It's starting to fade out now. Pretty cool. So if you want to add multiple audio tracks, all you have to do is come down, add audio. Let's get my fire open. I'm going to drag this to where the fire kind of starts a little bit before, so you can start hearing it before you see it. So maybe right there, click and drag this. And because I switched my mouse keys, right click will allow me to move the time slider, and left click will move the objects. So anyway, now if I hit play, I can have my fire in the shot. And of course I can fade it in too. So maybe it starts out at 0 for the audio. I'm going to hit I while I'm rolled over it to set a keyframe. And about here, bring it all the way up to, 1. I don't need any louder than 1. Hit I. Let's back up here and hit play. Voila. All right, so we're looking pretty good. That's all you want to do is just keep adding files, audio files, to make it sound snappy and cool, and just to add a little bit more atmosphere to the overall shot. Okay. So and of course you'd probably want to get some spark sound effects to when it's sparking, maybe some gears ticking or moving. Lots of options to create. So when you're done, when you've got all your audio clips laid out and you're finalized with the timeline, make sure you have your start and end time set. And you're going to come down to output. So I'm going to save this to the export folder. I'm going to call it time. And I'm going to say accept. And because I'm going to be saving it as I don't want it as a PNG. I'm going to change this to, I've got all these options over here. So let's say an H.264. But this is not where I really want to adjust it. I'm going to open up, let me just hit RGB on the safe side. Let me open up encoding. And in here, the encoding preset, this is where we can actually change a lot of things. So let's say we want the preset to be DVD quality. All right, click here. And you can see here it automatically chose an audio codecs for us and the bit rate for the audio. So that's kind of why I use the presets. I'm not an audio expert, so I don't quite understand this information here. So I can go through, and if there's an audio format that you guys really know, like MP3, I know that one, but I also know it's a low audio quality format. I've heard of ACC or AAC as well. Wave format is the one I use the most, but I don't think you can encode in wave. PCM I've heard of. Anyway, so you can choose which audio format you're going to put it in. What other options? H.264. I think it's going to stay with the ACC. And of course, like I said, you can choose your bitrate. Now, what's really cool is you can actually choose here and actually set it to a QuickTime container instead of the AVI containers, or a flash container if you want. So if I click QuickTime, and I can choose the codecs that the QuickTime is going to encode in. So I have an H.264 here, MPEG-1 to MPEG-4, which is really good. PNG format, which is going to give you, it's going to be a movie file, but it's going to be encoded as a PNG format, which keeps an alpha channel, but it also creates a really, really big file size. So if you were maybe going to encode this into a different program like Handbrake, which is a free encoder. In fact, this is Handbrake right here. Allows you to drag files into it and encodes them and creates really small file sizes. It's absolutely amazing, and it's not going to load because I think I'm running too much. But anyway, so Handbrake's great. It's a free encoder. Definitely check it out. But for right now, I'm going to use QuickTime H.264. Bitrate 600, 6000, I guess. Like I said, some of this I'm not really that familiar with. I'm not an encoding person. I just try to get the best quality I want. And to be honest, when I'm coming out of any 3D program, even if it's a video file, I'll usually choose PNG and encode it with Handbrake. All right. So let's leave it as H.264 for now, unless you really want to do something else. And you don't even have to do QuickTime. You can do one of these other containers as well, if you're more familiar with them. So I think that's it. We got a time set. So now all we need to do is scroll back up to the top and click animation. And it's going to go through and render this out. Now, I do believe it reset my size. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel this. Not good. Not good at all. So I'm going to switch this to 1920 by 1080. All right. So we got to pay attention to that. Make sure it's still set to QuickTime. Everything's good. Click animation, and now it's going to go through and render. So I'm going to go ahead and let this render through and I'll come right back with the final video. Okay, so it just finished rendering. Let me jump over to my folder, go to time, export, and here's my final video file. Let me close Handbrake. This is the Handbrake, by the way. It finally opened. Just give QuickTime a sec. There it goes. And here's the final file. And it's saying it needs additional help. Let me go ahead and close this. Let me try playing it with VLC. And I think it's because of the audio file, to be honest. Like I said, I'm not too familiar with my audio files and what plays in what. There it goes. So there's the audio. You can hear it. Okay, so go ahead and join me for part 11, and I'm going to go through and tweak and fix those things that I don't like about the video.